"You'll babysit Saturday, because I said so." I set the phone down, picked up my car keys, and drove to Savannah anyway. No explanation, no apology, no last-minute call saying I changed my mind. For 63 years, I had been the woman who rearranged her life every time someone else needed something. The woman who said yes before the question finished. The woman who canceled lunch with her best friend, skipped painting class, postponed a 2-year-old promise because family needs you, Mom. That woman hung up the phone on a Thursday evening and never came back. What Claire said next when she found out I had actually left, I was not prepared for. And neither was my son. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. And if this is speaking to you, subscribe, because we're just getting started. The calendar on her wall had my name on it, and she never asked me. Once I need to tell you about a Tuesday morning in October that I almost let slide right past me without saying a word. That was almost the version of this story, the quiet version, the one where I swallowed it and kept going, the one where I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that family is family, that I was being too sensitive. But I didn't let it slide, and everything changed because of that. My name is Evelyn Parker. I'm 63 years old. I live alone in a yellow house with a front porch I love, and a garden that has taken me 4 years to get right. I am a retired school teacher. I taught 5th grade for 31 years in the same district, and when I finally walked out of that school building for the last time, I cried in my car for 20 minutes. Not because I was sad, but because I was so profoundly relieved that what came next finally belonged entirely to me. My husband Gerald passed away 3 years before my retirement. Heart attack. Sudden. No warning, no long goodbye. Just a Thursday evening, and then a phone call, and then a life that looked completely different than the one I had planned. If you've lost someone that way, you know what I mean when I say it doesn't just break your heart. It rearranges everything. Your mornings, your grocery lists, your reasons for doing anything at all. After Gerald died, I threw myself into work because work was the one thing I could still control. I showed up every day. I graded papers at the kitchen table where we used to eat dinner together. I read to my students about history and courage and people who kept going when keeping going felt impossible, and I thought silently every single day, me too, me too. My son Daniel is 40 years old. He has my husband's eyes and Gerald's stubbornness, and I say this with love, Gerald's tendency to avoid hard conversations until they become unavoidable. He married Claire 11 years ago at a ceremony in the Smoky Mountains that I helped pay for, and I was genuinely happy for them. Claire is smart. She's driven. She has a career in marketing that she built from nothing, and I respected that about her from the beginning. We were never best friends. We were too different for that, but we were family. And I believed for a long time that being family was enough. Their son Noah was born 4.5 years ago, and the day I held that baby in my arms in the hospital, this little warm, squirming, red-faced miracle with Daniel's nose, I felt something come back to life inside me that I thought had gone permanently quiet after Gerald died. I would have done anything for that child. And that right there is where my story really begins. Because when you love someone that completely, when you would genuinely do anything, the people around you sometimes start to believe you literally mean anything. No limits, no conditions, no end. And some of them will test that belief until they find the edge. The first time Claire asked me to babysit Noah, he was 4 months old, and she had a work conference 2 hours away. Mom, she called me Mom from the beginning, which I had always appreciated. Would you be okay watching Noah Thursday through Saturday? We'd cover your gas. That was how she asked. Would you be okay? Past tense conditional, a question with room for a no. I said yes. Of course I said yes. I packed a bag, drove to their house 40 minutes away, and spent 3 days rocking a 4-month-old through his colic and loving every minute of it. Daniel called to check in. Claire texted thank yous. When I drove home Sunday morning, there was a card on my windshield handwritten from both of them that said, "We couldn't do this without you. Thank you for everything." I kept that card in my kitchen drawer for 2 years. I kept it there until the morning. I finally cleaned that drawer out and realized that the woman who received that card and the woman who was standing in that kitchen had almost nothing left in common. The shift didn't happen all at once. That's what I want you to understand, because if it had happened all at once, I would have seen it and responded. Instead, it was like the tide coming in, so gradual, so natural feeling that by the time I realized I was underwater, I could barely remember what dry land had felt like. In the beginning, the requests were occasional, a few days a month. Reasonable things, a work dinner, a weekend trip, a doctor's appointment where they needed someone at the house. I was retired, I had the time, I was glad to help. Then the requests became regular, every other Friday, then every Friday, then Friday and Saturday. I didn't say anything because the truth is I loved seeing Noah. That part was always real. He was at the age where everything amazed him, bugs, clouds, the way shadows worked, the sound of his own name. Being with him felt like being handed a small piece of something sacred. I didn't want to jeopardize that. But slowly something else started changing too, the way Claire asked. At some point, and I couldn't tell you exactly when, because again it was gradual, the questions stopped being questions. We need you here by 7:30 Friday. Can you stay through Sunday this time? Daniel has a golf thing. I told Noah you'd be here in the morning, so don't be late. The first time she said that last one, don't be late, I felt something small and sharp move through my chest. Not anger, not yet. More like a quiet alert. The kind your body sends when something is wrong before your brain has caught up with why. I told myself she was stressed. She was balancing a demanding career and a young child and a household and a husband who I love. My son was not always the most present partner. I gave her grace. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I gave her my Fridays and my Saturdays and sometimes my Sundays. And then one morning I gave her something I hadn't planned to give anyone. It was a Wednesday. I had plans, a genuine pre-existing marked on my calendar appointment with my friend Patricia, who I had known for 22 years and who I saw roughly once a month because her schedule was as full as mine, which meant canceling was not a small thing. Patricia and I had a standing lunch at a little Italian restaurant we both loved. We'd been doing it for years, the kind of friendship where you can pick up mid-sentence no matter how long it's been. My phone rang at 8:15 that morning. Claire. Hey, I need you to come over today. Not, are you available? Not, I know it's short notice, but just I need you to come over today. Claire, I actually have plans with Patricia this afternoon. We've had it on the calendar for... This is important, Mom. Noah has a low fever and his daycare won't take him sick, and I have 2 client meetings today that I absolutely cannot reschedule. Daniel's in Chicago. I don't have anyone else. I paused. I thought about Patricia. I thought about the lunch I'd been looking forward to for 3 weeks. Then I thought about my 4-year-old grandson with a fever, and my heart did what it always did. It moved toward him. Okay, I said. I'll be there by 9. Great. I'll leave a key under the mat. I might be late getting back, so just make yourself at home. She hung up. I called Patricia and apologized. Patricia, who had known me long enough to hear things in my voice, I wasn't saying out loud, paused for a moment before she responded. Evelyn, this is the 3rd time in 2 months. I know. He's sick, I understand, but I want you to think about something. Patricia, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I just want you to ask yourself if you had called Claire this morning and said you needed her to cancel something important because of a family situation, would she do it? I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, because I knew exactly, and the answer sat in my stomach like a stone. I'll call you next week, I said. I'm sorry. I drove to their house and Noah had a temperature of 99.2, which any experienced mother knows is barely a fever at all. He was watching cartoons on the couch and eating crackers. He wasn't suffering. He was fine. I stayed until 6:30 in the evening. While I was there, I washed their dishes. I folded a basket of laundry that had been sitting by the dryer. I cleaned up the living room and organized Noah's toy bin and started a pot of soup so they'd have dinner ready when Claire got home. She walked in at 6:40, glanced around the kitchen and said, "Oh, good, you made soup." Not thank you, not I'm so sorry to drag you away from your plans, just, oh, good, you made soup, like I had been hired, like it was my job. I drove home that night and Patricia's words rode with me the whole way. Would she do it for you? I started paying attention after that. Really paying attention, not the vague, well-meaning attention I had given before, but the kind that notices patterns and holds on to details. And what I noticed unsettled me in a way I hadn't expected. Claire had started referring to my availability as a given, a fact. Not a favor, but a feature of her week, the way you factor in grocery delivery or a gym class, something that happens reliably on schedule because it's been built into the system. She talked about it openly. I found this out from my neighbor Margaret, who had coffee with a woman who lived on Clare's street. Your daughter-in-law was talking about you at the neighborhood cookout last month, Margaret told me one afternoon, her voice careful and measured the way someone's voice gets when they're about to say something they know you won't like. She was talking about how lucky they were that you didn't have a lot going on, so you were always available. She made it sound like you practically lived there. I set my coffee cup down. She said you were glad to do it, that it gave you a sense of purpose. I went home that night and sat at my kitchen table for a long time. A sense of purpose. As though the life I had built, the 31 years in a classroom, the friendships, the garden, the books I was reading, the painting classes I had signed up for and canceled 4 times because something always came up, as though all of that added up to nothing, as though I were an empty room waiting to be useful. I thought about Gerald. I thought about the retirement we had planned together, traveling in the fall, learning to cook new things, sleeping in on Saturdays without an alarm. We had talked about it for years. He never got to have it. I thought, I am still here. I am still alive. And I am spending the life he didn't get to have, answering someone else's phone calls. That thought didn't make me angry. Not at first. It made me terribly bone-achingly sad. I want to tell you about the calendar, because the calendar was the moment the sadness started becoming something else. 3 weeks after the conversation with Margaret, I drove over to Daniel and Claire's house to drop off a birthday gift for Noah. His birthday was the following Saturday, and I was driving to my sister's that weekend, so I came early. I let myself in with my key. Claire was at work. Daniel was at work. Noah was at daycare. The house was quiet. I set the gift on the counter, and that's when I saw it. On the wall beside the refrigerator, they had one of those large paper calendars, the kind with big squares for each day, where you write everything in colored markers, the kind you can see from across the room. My name was on it. Not once, not twice. My name was written in blue marker across 8 separate days in the next 6 weeks. 8 days, planned out, scheduled, without a single phone call to me, without a text, an email, a conversation, nothing. Just my name written into their lives like a standing appointment. I stood in that kitchen and stared at that calendar for what felt like a very long time. I took a photograph of it with my phone. I don't know exactly why, some instinct that said, document this, remember this moment. Then I sat down at their kitchen table, and for the first time I let myself feel the full weight of what had been happening. This wasn't a family leaning on each other during hard times. This was a system. I was a resource in their system, unpaid, unscheduled, by my own choice, and apparently no longer even consulted. My retirement had been quietly, incrementally, systematically converted into their childcare plan. And they had done it so smoothly, so gradually, that I had almost not noticed until my name was on a stranger's calendar in blue marker. I drove home slowly that afternoon. I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I made a cup of tea. I sat in the good chair by my living room window, the one I almost never sit in because there's always something that needs doing, and I just sat there. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't check my phone. I thought about who I had been before all of this. Before Gerald died, I had been a woman who painted. Not professionally, just for the love of it, acrylics, mostly landscapes and sometimes portraits, the occasional abstract piece when I was in that kind of mood. I had 2 paintings hanging in my hallway that I had done 10 years ago, and I hadn't picked up a brush since. I thought about the book club I had tried to join 18 months ago, the one that met every other Thursday evening at the public library. I had gone twice, loved it, and then dropped out because Claire needed me on Thursdays, and I told myself I could rejoin later. Later never came. I thought about my friend Rosalind, who had moved to Savannah 2 years ago, and called me every few months hoping I'd come visit. I kept saying soon, and soon had not happened. I thought about the painting class at the community center that I had signed up for twice and canceled twice because something always came up. Something always came up. And the something was always the same, a phone call from Claire. I sat in that chair and I looked at my own living room, my books, my Gerald's photograph on the mantel, my grandmother's quilt on the couch, and I thought, whose life is this? The question felt absurd. Of course it was my life, my house, my chair, my tea, but whose time was it? Whose schedule? Whose choices? I thought about the photograph on my phone, my name on their calendar. 8 days, no conversation, no request. Just an assumption written in blue marker that I would be there. I sat in that chair until it was dark outside, and when I finally stood up, something had changed in me. Quietly, without drama, without even a decision. I could point to something had shifted, like a door that had been slightly ajar for a long time had finally gently closed. I didn't know yet exactly what I was going to do. I didn't have a speech prepared or a plan in place, but I knew something I hadn't let myself fully know before. I was not furniture. I was not a feature of their household. I was not a resource to be scheduled without being consulted. I was a woman, a mother, a grandmother, a person with a life that had existed long before Daniel was born and would continue to exist long after every argument in this story was forgotten. And it was time past time for everyone in my family to remember that. Daniel called me that Friday. His voice had the particular careful quality it gets when he's been asked to make a call. He'd rather not make diplomatic a little too, even like a man reading from a script he didn't write. "Hey, Mom, so Claire mentioned she's got some big account presentations next week and she was wondering if you could do Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday." I looked at my calendar. I had the painting class Monday, Patricia on Tuesday, and Wednesday I had promised myself I was going to drive out to the botanical garden, which I had been wanting to do for 2 years. "I can't do Monday or Tuesday," I said. "I might be able to do Wednesday afternoon, but I'd need to know by Sunday." A pause. "Mom, these are really important presentations for her." "I understand that, and my plans are important to me. If they need childcare for Monday and Tuesday, they'll need to look into other options." Another pause, longer this time. "You know how expensive daycare is." "I do know. That's why I'm happy to help when I can plan for it. But I can't rearrange my week on 3 days' notice every time Claire has a busy stretch. That's not something I'm able to keep doing." Is everything okay? You sound..." "I'm fine, Daniel. I love you and I love Noah. I just need you to understand that I need some notice and I need to be asked, not told." He said he'd talk to Claire. He sounded uncertain in a way that told me this conversation had not gone the way he expected. I hung up and stood in my kitchen for a moment. My hands were perfectly steady. Claire called the next morning. I want to describe her voice to you because her voice is important. It was controlled, not warm, not angry, but controlled the way someone's voice gets when they're managing an emotion they've decided not to display, like a surface that's calm because the storm is underneath. "Daniel said you're not available next week." I said I wasn't available Monday and Tuesday. I may be able to do Wednesday afternoon. "Mom." A pause, deliberate, waited. "I have the Morrison account presentation on Monday. I told you how big this is." "You didn't actually tell me anything. Daniel called Friday afternoon." "I need you there at 7:30. "Claire, I won't be there at 7:30 Monday. I have a commitment." "What commitment?" I noticed the question, the presumption in it that whatever I had on my calendar was automatically negotiable, automatically less important, automatically the kind of thing that moves aside when real life calls. "I have a painting class." The silence was brief, but I heard everything in it. "A painting class?" "Yes." "You're telling me your painting class is more important than my Morrison account." "I'm telling you that my painting class is on my calendar, and it was on my calendar before you needed me on Monday. And I'm telling you that the way this has been working, where I find out what I'm doing for the week, when you or Daniel call me to tell me that's not something I can continue. We're not asking for that much. Claire, you wrote my name on your calendar for 8 days over the next 6 weeks, without asking me. I saw it." Silence. "You came to the house." "I dropped off Noah's birthday gift, and yes, I saw the calendar." The controlled voice cracked slightly, not into anger, into something more like recalculation. "I just assumed." "I know, and that's what I need to talk to you about. You assumed. And I understand why I've always said yes before, so yes started to feel like a guarantee. But it isn't a guarantee. It never was. It was a choice I was making every time, and I need that to be visible. I need to be asked. I don't have time for this right now." "Then we can talk about it another time. But I want you to hear me clearly. I love Noah, and I want to be part of his life. That hasn't changed. What has to change is how we make these arrangements." She hung up, not angrily, or maybe not only angrily. There was something else in the way she ended the call, something that felt more like someone who has just been told a rule of the game has changed and hasn't yet figured out how to adjust. I stood in my kitchen and breathed. My hands were still steady. The days that followed were not comfortable. I want to be honest about that because I think sometimes we tell these stories as though setting a boundary is a clean and triumphant thing. You say the right words and immediately everything gets better. That is not what happened. What happened was a week of uncomfortable silence. Daniel texted Mom. "I think you really upset Claire," I responded. I was honest with her. "I love you both." I didn't reply right away. When he did, it was brief. "She worked really hard to get that account." I sat with that message for a while. Then I typed back, "I know she works hard." I also worked hard for 31 years. I'm retired now and I'm trying to figure out what that means for me. I'd love your help with that." He didn't respond to that one at all. It hurt. Of course it hurt. He is my son. His silence landed with weight. But I made myself sit with it instead of fixing it. I made myself not call, not apologize, not soften the edges of what I had said to make everyone more comfortable. I went to my painting class on Monday. It was held in the back room of the community center. 8 people seated around folding tables. A woman named Joan, who taught with the kind of quiet authority that I recognized and respected. We were working on a still life fruit in a bowl simple, and I hadn't held a brush in so long that my first attempts were clumsy, my hand uncertain about the pressure. But by the end of the 2 hours, something in me was loose that had been wound tight for a very long time. I drove home with paint on my hands, and I thought this is what I was canceling. 2 weeks passed. Claire did not call. Daniel called once briefly to check in, the kind of call that is doing 2 things at once, catching up and gauging the temperature. I was warm with him. I asked about Noah. I asked about his work. I did not bring up Claire. He did not bring up Claire. I had lunch with Patricia. I told her what had happened, all of it, and she listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love about her. When I finished, she looked at me across the table and said, "How are you feeling?" Honestly, like I finally turned on a light in a room I'd been sitting in the dark. She nodded like that made perfect sense. "Did Daniel say anything?" "He told me I upset Claire. I told him I had been honest. And he went quiet. He's not good at being in the middle. He never was. Gerald was the same way." "What do you need from him?" I thought about that. I need him to see me. Not just as his mother, not just as Noah's grandmother, but as a person with her own life. I don't think he's been doing that. I think he loves me, but I think for the last year or more, I've been a function to him and not a person. Patricia reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "You came back," she said. "What do you mean?" "The Evelyn who used to paint and read and plan trips to Savannah to see Rosalind. She went somewhere for a while, but you came back." I squeezed her hand and did not say anything because I was afraid if I tried to speak I'd cry, and I didn't want to cry in the middle of the restaurant. It was a Thursday evening. I was home making dinner music on in the kitchen, the way I've always loved when Claire called. I almost didn't answer. Not out of hostility, just out of something honest, a recognition that I needed to know I could choose not to answer before I chose to answer. That might sound like a small thing, but for me in that moment it was enormous. I answered. "Mom." Her voice was flat. Not warm, not conciliatory flat, like a business call. "Hello, Claire. I need you Saturday, 8 in the morning. I have a team off-site. No build-up, no how are you. No acknowledgement of the conversation we'd had. Just I need you Saturday. I'm not available Saturday morning." "Then what time can you do?" "Claire, I'm not available Saturday. I have plans." A pause. "What plans?" There was that question again, and I noticed it again, the assumption embedded in it, that my plans were variables, that they bent. "I'm going to Savannah this weekend to see Rosalind. I've been planning it for 3 weeks." "Rosalind?" "My friend, yes. You're going to visit a friend instead of watching your grandson." I took a quiet breath. "I'm going to see someone I love who I've been promising to visit for 2 years. It's not a trade-off. It's my life. We're family. Rosalind is your friend." "Rosalind has been my friend for 18 years. She is my family. And yes, I'm going." The flatness in Claire's voice shifted. It became something sharper. "Mom, I have been very patient." "Claire." My voice was calm, completely calm. I want you to hear that. I was not angry. I was not emotional. I was clear. "I know this is frustrating. I understand that you're managing a demanding week and that childcare is a real challenge. I genuinely empathize with that. But I am not available Saturday, and I need you to arrange something else. You know how much last-minute childcare costs?" "I do." "So you're fine with us spending $200 on a sitter because you're going to Savannah?" "I'm not responsible for that cost. I help when I can and when I've been asked. This weekend I wasn't asked. I was informed on a Thursday evening, and the answer is no." The line went quiet. Then she said it. Not loudly, not in a rage. She said it in the voice of someone who is accustomed to getting what they want and has run out of other tools. "You'll babysit Saturday because I said so." I have thought about that sentence many times since then, the way she said it. The particular entitlement packed into those 8 words, not just the demand, but the reasoning. Because I said so. Not because of Noah, not because of family, because she said so, as though that were a sufficient justification, as though I were an employee who had forgotten who was in charge. I did not respond immediately. I let the silence sit. And then I said carefully and quietly and with complete certainty, "Claire, you have every right to make decisions for your child. You do not have the right to make decisions about my time, my life, or how I spend my weekends. Those belong to me." Silence. My answer is no. Not because I don't love Noah, because I have a life, and it's mine. She hung up, and I stood in my kitchen in the quiet with the music still playing something soft, something old that Gerald used to like, and I finished making my dinner. I did not cry. I did not second-guess myself. I did not reach for the phone to call her back and soften it. I ate at my own table in my own home, in the life that had always been mine. And for the first time in over a year, I felt like I was finally living inside it again. Next. What happened when Daniel found out what Claire had said, and the conversation that forced my son to finally choose what kind of family we were going to be? The morning I left anyway, and everything that broke open while I was gone. I want to tell you about the drive to Savannah. Not because the drive itself was dramatic. It wasn't. It was 4 hours on a highway I knew well, coffee from a gas station outside of Augusta, the radio on low, the kind of October morning where the light comes in sideways and makes everything look like it belongs in a painting. It was quiet. It was ordinary. And that was exactly the point. Because ordinary, the ordinary right to get in my car and go somewhere I had promised to go without asking permission, without explaining myself to anyone, had become something I had forgotten I was allowed to have. I had told Rosalind I was coming 3 weeks earlier. She'd responded with a string of exclamation points and a voice message that lasted 4 minutes and covered approximately 12 different things she wanted us to do while I was there. I had laughed listening to it in my car and felt for a moment like myself. Like the version of myself that existed before I became primarily useful. My bag was packed the night before. I was on the road by 7:15. My phone rang at 7:42. Claire. I looked at the screen. I let it ring. 4 rings, 5, and then voicemail. I turned the radio up slightly and kept driving. She called again at 8:03. I let it ring again. The third call came at 8:19, and this time it was Daniel. I answered. "Mom, where are you?" "I'm on I-16, about 90 minutes out of Savannah." A pause so long I thought the call had dropped. You actually left." "I told Claire last night I wasn't available. I told her I was going to Savannah. Yes, I left. She's been trying to reach you." "I know, I saw." "Mom." His voice had that quality again, the careful diplomatic reading from a script quality that told me he'd been put up to this call. "Her off-site starts in an hour. Noah is here and there's no one—" "Daniel." I kept my voice even. "I told her last night. I told her clearly. I need you to hear me. I am not turning this car around." Another long pause. "She's really upset." "I understand that. I'm sorry she's in a difficult position, but I told her no, and she told me I'd do it anyway, because she said so. And I needed you both of you to understand that I meant what I said." The silence on his end was different from Claire's silences. Hers were strategic. His was the silence of a man who had just collided with a reality he hadn't prepared for. "What are we supposed to do about Noah?" "You call a babysitter. You call a neighbor. You figure it out the way every other working parent figures it out when their plans fall through. I love you. Tell Noah I'll call him tonight." I hung up. My hands on the wheel were steady. My eyes were on the road. The sky ahead of me was wide and pale blue and completely indifferent to Claire's off-site meeting, and I drove toward it. Rosalind met me at the door of her house in Savannah with both arms open and the particular expression of a person who has been waiting a long time for something they were starting to think might never actually arrive. She is 61 years old, small, sharp-eyed with silver locks. She started growing 5 years ago, and a laugh that carries 3 rooms. She hugged me for longer than was strictly necessary, and I let her. "You actually came," she said into my shoulder. "I told you I was coming. You told me you were coming 4 other times. This time I meant it more." She pulled back and looked at my face the way old friends do not at your surface, but past it, checking for something specific. Whatever she was looking for, she seemed to find it. "Something happened," she said, not a question. Can I have some of whatever that is first? I nodded toward the coffee cup in her hand. You can have the whole pot, and then you're going to tell me everything. I told her everything. We sat on her back porch for 2 hours, real hours, uninterrupted with coffee, and then sweet tea, and then the remains of a pecan coffee cake she'd made the night before, and I started from the beginning. The calendar on their kitchen wall, the overheard conversation about me having nothing going on, the painting class I'd canceled, Patricia's voice when she told me I'd canceled on her for the 3rd time, the way Claire's requests had stopped being questions, the way my name had started appearing in their lives like a standing appointment that nobody needed to confirm. Rosalind didn't interrupt. She had always been good at that, at listening all the way to the end before she said anything, which is rarer than people realize and more valuable than most things. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you know what I kept thinking while you were talking?" "What?" "That you've been apologizing for being alive." I stared at her. "Not in those words. But in every story you just told me, every time you canceled Patricia, every time you drove 40 minutes on 2 hours' notice, every time you folded their laundry and cleaned their kitchen and made their dinner, you were sending the same message. You were saying my presence in your life is more important than my presence in my own." "I love Noah." "I know you love Noah. That's not what I'm talking about, and you know it." I looked down at my coffee. "Gerald would have hated this," she said. "You know that, right? Gerald would have called Daniel and said something extremely direct that would have settled this about 14 months ago." I laughed, short and sudden, a real laugh, the first one in what felt like weeks. "He absolutely would have. He used to call me Rosalind the Reckoning," she said. "You remember that? He said you were the only person he'd ever met who could make someone feel grateful for being told they were wrong. I'm about to live up to that name." "Go ahead." She leaned forward and looked at me steadily. "You need to stop waiting for them to see it on their own. They won't. Not because they're bad people, Daniel loves you, I know that, but because you have trained them very carefully over a very long time to see you as always available. You've been consistent, you've been reliable, you've never broken the pattern, and now you've broken it once and they're shocked." She paused. "One time is not enough. You have to keep going." "I know." "Do you? Because I've heard you say 'I know' before, and then watch you rearrange yourself for someone else." I met her eyes. "I drove to Savannah." She smiled, slow and genuine. "You drove to Savannah," she agreed. "That's a start." My phone buzzed while we were eating lunch. A text from Daniel. "We found a sitter. Mom, I think we need to talk when you get back. Not about this, just talk. I miss you." I read it twice. That last sentence, "I miss you," hit somewhere unexpected, because I realized I missed him too. Not the Daniel who called me on Claire's behalf. Not the Daniel who said she worked really hard for that account. The Daniel who was my son. The one who used to call me every Sunday when he was in college just to tell me about his week. The one who cried at his father's funeral with his head on my shoulder and didn't try to stop. I had been so focused on the situation that I had almost lost track of the person underneath it. And I suspect he had been doing the same with me. I texted back, "I miss you too. We'll talk. Love you." He replied immediately, "Love you too, Mom." It wasn't resolution. It wasn't even close to resolution. But it was something real, and I held on to it. Rosalind read the exchange over my shoulder. She is completely unabashed about that kind of thing, always has been, and said simply, "He's not the main problem." "No, he's not." "She is." "Yes. And she's not done." I knew that too. Claire was not a person who absorbed a no quietly and adjusted. She was a person who regrouped, who waited for a better angle. I had known her long enough to understand that, and I was not naive enough to think that one phone call and a drive to Savannah had settled anything. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have predicted, was how she would come at it next, or who she would use to do it. I stayed in Savannah for 3 days. 3 real days, the kind I hadn't had in so long that I'd almost forgotten what they felt like. Rosalind and I walked through Forsyth Park in the mornings. We found a bookstore I could have lived in. We ate at a restaurant where the shrimp and grits were so good, I took a photograph of the bowl. We stayed up past midnight on Saturday, talking about everything Gerald retirement, what we thought our 60s would look like versus what they actually looked like. The particular strange freedom of being women our age in a world that was often confused about what to do with us. I called Noah Saturday evening. He answered the phone with Grandma, in the loud, unself-conscious way that 4-year-olds greet people they love, and I spent 20 minutes listening to him tell me about a caterpillar he had found in the backyard. He was unbothered. He was joyful. He was fine. Whatever storm was happening between the adults in his life had not reached him, and I was grateful for that. I drove home Sunday afternoon with the windows down and something in my chest that I had not felt in a very long time. Space. Not emptiness, not the hollow kind, the other kind. The kind that means there's room for something. Monday morning my doorbell rang at 9:15. I was still in my robe, coffee in hand, and I was genuinely not expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and felt the specific sensation of a stomach dropping. It was Claire's mother, Diane. I want to be precise about what I knew in that moment. I knew that Diane and I were cordial. We had been cordial for 11 years, the way two women who love the same family can be cordial without being close. I knew that Diane thought Claire could do very little wrong, and I knew with an instinct that was swift and certain that this visit was not a coincidence. I opened the door. "Diane, this is a surprise." She had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable, which told me she knew this was not a casual call either. "I hope I'm not bothering you, Evelyn. I was in the area and I thought I'd stop by." She paused. "Do you have a few minutes?" "Of course, come in." I poured her coffee without asking, because it gave me something to do with my hands while I steadied myself, and we sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had sat weeks earlier looking at gas receipts and thinking about how much of myself I had given away. She wrapped her hands around the mug and looked at me with the careful expression of someone who has rehearsed an opening. "Claire told me what happened," she said. "I assumed she might have. She's really struggling, Evelyn. The pressure at work right now is, I know you know how hard she works." "I do. And Noah needs consistency. He asks for you. He gets confused when things change suddenly." I noticed what she was doing, methodically, kindly, with genuine love for her daughter. I don't doubt that she was redirecting the story. In the version she was telling, I was the disruption, the sudden change, the one who had confused a small child by having the audacity to take a trip I had planned and announced. "Diane." I kept my voice gentle because I respected her and because I understood she was here as a mother, and that was something I knew something about. "I understand that you love Claire. I love Daniel, and I love Noah. That hasn't changed." "Then why? Can I show you something?" I got up, found my phone, opened the photograph I had taken 3 weeks earlier. The calendar on their kitchen wall. My name in blue marker, 8 times 6 weeks of someone else's plans built around my unpaid availability. I set the phone on the table and slid it toward her. She looked at it for a long moment. "She didn't ask me about any of those days," I said. "She didn't call. She didn't text. She wrote my name on her calendar and built her work schedule around me without a single conversation. That's not how you treat family. That's how you treat staff." Diane was quiet. She looked at the photograph, and then she looked at me, and something in her expression shifted, not much but enough. "I didn't know about the calendar," she said finally. "I believe you." She should have asked. Yes, she should have. Another silence. Longer this time. She's under a lot of pressure. I know she is. So was I for 31 years, and during all of that time I still asked people for help instead of assuming I was entitled to it. Diane looked down at her coffee. When she looked back up, the rehearsed quality was gone from her expression. She looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from loving someone who is difficult and knowing it. "What do you need from her, Evelyn? What would make this better?" I need to be asked. That's really the heart of it. I need a conversation, not an assignment. I need her to understand that my time has value, that my plans have weight, and that my answer isn't guaranteed just because my answer has usually been yes. "That's fair," she said quietly. "I think so too." She stayed for another 20 minutes. The conversation softened. We talked about Noah's birthday coming up, about Diane's garden, about small neutral things that gave both of us time to settle. When she left, she hugged me at the door, which she had never done before. I noticed that. I noticed it, and I thought she heard me. She won't forget that calendar. Tuesday afternoon, Daniel came over alone. Not announced he knocked, which he didn't always do, which told me he was being deliberate about something. I opened the door and he stood there with his father's eyes and the particular look he has always had when he's about to say something that costs him something. "Got a minute?" "I've got more than a minute. Come in." We sat in the living room, not the kitchen. I don't know why I steered us there, maybe because the living room is softer, less transactional. He sat on the couch, and I sat in my chair, and for a moment neither of us said anything, and it felt strangely like the right place to start. "I owe you an apology," he said. I waited. I think I've been handling this wrong. Both of us have, Claire and I." He looked at his hands. "I think we got used to you. And I think getting used to you turned into taking advantage of you, and I didn't see it because it was convenient not to see it. Daniel, let me finish, please." He looked up. "Diane called Claire last night. I don't know everything they talked about, but Claire was quiet after, which you know Claire. She's not usually quiet, and she showed me the calendar this morning. Your name." 8 times, I said. 6 weeks. 8 times. 6 weeks. He shook his head. "I didn't even think about it when she did it. It just seemed like planning, like she was being organized. I didn't stop and think about the fact that you weren't part of that conversation at all. You're allowed to plan. You just need to include me in it." I know that now." A pause. "Dad would have told me this a long time ago." The mention of Gerald moved through me the way it always does, not painfully, not anymore, but with that particular resonant quality that loss leaves behind. "Yes," I said, "he would have. He used to say that the best thing a man can do for his mother is make sure she knows she's still a person, not just a role. He said he learned it from watching his own mother get smaller and smaller as she got older, because everyone just kept needing things from her, and nobody ever asked her what she needed." Daniel's voice was quieter now. "I forgot that. I let myself forget it because it was easier." I looked at my son, really looked at him, past the apology and the discomfort, past the management of the situation, and I saw him. The boy who used to bring me wildflowers from the backyard. The teenager who called me from his first road trip just to tell me he'd arrived safe. The man standing at his father's graveside holding my hand because we were each other's and we always would be. "I forgive you," I said, simply, without conditions. He exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for days. "Claire wants to apologize too," he said. She doesn't do it easily, but I think she will, when she's ready. She can take her time. I'm not going anywhere. She knows she went too far. What she said, the because I said so thing, she knows. Does she understand why it wasn't just rude but wrong, that she was treating me like someone whose choices are subordinate to hers, not just impolite, fundamentally wrong? He met my eyes. "I think she's starting to." "That's what matters," I said. "Not the apology, the understanding." We had coffee after that. We talked about Noah's birthday and Daniel's work and a trip he was thinking about taking the family on in the spring. Normal conversation. The kind families have when they are being a family instead of managing a conflict. When he left, he hugged me in the doorway, the same way he did when he was 22, and heading back to college, the full hug, both arms, the kind that means something. "I love you, Mom. I love you too. Always." I watched his car pull out of the driveway, stood there for a moment in the open doorway, the October air cool and clean against my face. Then I went back inside, picked up my paintbrush, and went back to work on the piece. I'd started the Monday of the painting class, a simple landscape, mostly sky, the kind of wide-open blue that doesn't ask anything from you. I thought the hard part was over. I want to be honest with you, I genuinely thought that Daniel's apology and Diane's quiet acknowledgement of the calendar and Claire's apparent moment of reflection meant that we had turned a corner. I thought the worst of it was behind us. I was wrong. 3 days later, my phone rang at 6:50 in the morning. 6:50. Before my coffee was finished, before the day had even properly started, it was Claire, not Daniel, Claire herself. "Good morning," I said carefully, because that hour on that number had the specific feeling of something incoming. "Good morning." Her voice was controlled again, not warm controlled. "I've been thinking about our situation." "Okay, I want to be clear about something. I know Daniel talked to you. I know he apologized, but I need you to understand my perspective." I said nothing. I waited. I work 60 hours a week. I have a team of 12 people who depend on my decisions. I have a child and a household and a career that doesn't slow down because life gets complicated. And for the past year, the one stable thing in our childcare situation has been you. And when you suddenly decide for a painting class for a trip to Savannah to stop being that stable thing, it doesn't just inconvenience me, it destabilizes everything. I let the silence sit for a moment. "Claire, do you hear what you just said?" "Yes, I said I rely on you." "You said the one stable thing in your childcare situation has been me. Do you understand what it means for a person to be described as a stable thing in someone else's childcare situation? A pause. That's not what I meant. That's what you said, and I think it's actually what you meant even if you didn't intend it to land that way. I am not a thing. I'm not a feature of your childcare plan. I'm a person. I'm Daniel's mother. I'm Noah's grandmother. And for the last year, I have been treated like a standing appointment. I've thanked you occasionally between assignments. The controlled voice cracked again, not into anger this time, into something that surprised me, something that sounded almost like the beginning of real emotion. I don't know what you want from me, Evelyn. And here's the moment that changed everything between us. Not my answer, though. My answer mattered. What changed things was the way she asked the question. Because for the first time, the strategy was gone. The management was gone. It was just a woman who was exhausted and overwhelmed asking another woman what she needed and meaning it. I want to be your family, I said. Not your resource. There's a difference. When you call me and ask if I'm available and I say yes, that's family. When you write my name on a calendar without calling when you tell me I'll do something because you said so, when you explain to your neighbors that I don't have anything else going on that's not family. That's an employer-employee relationship, except you're not paying me. A long silence. I told my neighbors that I stayed with you because it gave me a sense of purpose. Another silence. This one felt different, heavier, more interior, like she was sitting with something. That was unkind of me, she said finally, slowly, like the words cost her something. Yes, it was. I didn't mean it to be. I think I was just trying to explain why you were always there, to make it sound normal. It is normal for a grandmother to be involved in her grandchild's life. What wasn't normal was the expectation that I had no other life, that I was available by default. I know. Her voice was quieter now. I grew up watching my grandmother do that, just always be there, always available, and I thought that was just what grandmothers did, what they wanted. Some do, but you never asked me what I wanted. No, she said. I didn't. That conversation lasted 40 minutes. Not a resolution, not a white flag, not a transformation. But something shifted in those 40 minutes, something real and not performative. For the first time, Claire was not managing the situation. She was in it, present and uncomfortable and genuinely listening, which I believe was harder for her than most things. Before she hung up, she said, "I'm going to be better about asking. Not a promise, not a guarantee, just a statement of intention." "That's all I'm asking for," I said, and I meant it. The days after that conversation had a different quality, quieter, less pressurized, the difference between weather that's been building all week and the morning after the storm finally breaks. The air just feels different, cleaner somehow, easier to breathe. I went to my painting class Thursday. I finished the landscape I'd started, mostly sky, that wide open blue, and Joan the teacher held it up and said something about the light in it that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't expected from a Tuesday afternoon painting class. Patricia and I had lunch Friday. I told her everything, all of it, and she listened and then said, "I knew you had it in you." "I've always had it in me." "I know, you just forgot." I had a call with Daniel. Saturday morning, easy, unhurried, the kind of call we used to have before everything got complicated. He told me Noah had been asking when he could come see my house, when he could see my garden, when he could help me cook something, because apparently I had made the mistake of letting him stir brownie batter once 18 months ago, and he had never forgotten it. "Bring him Sunday," I said. "Early. We'll make something messy." "He's going to lose his mind." "Good. He should lose his mind. He's 4. I laughed. Daniel laughed, and it sounded like us again. Sunday morning, I set out flour and cocoa powder and the good mixing bowls. I put an apron on and got out a second one that came down to Noah's ankles when Daniel walked him through my door at 10 o'clock. Noah ran at me full speed the way he always does, arms out, and I caught him and held him close and breathed in the small child smell of him, something sweet and warm and indescribably his, and thought about everything it had taken to get to this moment. Not a moment of triumph, just a moment of ordinary, uncomplicated love, which was, I realized, exactly what I had been fighting for. We made brownies. We made a significant mess. There was cocoa powder on the ceiling in one spot that I didn't notice until after they left, and that I left there for a week because it made me smile every time I saw it. This was not the end of the story. Claire still had hard days. She still on occasion slipped back into old habits, a text that assumed instead of asked a plan, made without checking. And I still on occasion had to remind her clearly and without anger that I needed to be consulted. But the tenor had changed. The fundamental understanding had shifted. Something had been named that couldn't be unnamed, and we were all slowly, imperfectly, humanly learning to live on the other side of it. I was not done fighting. I knew that. But I had won something essential. I had won back the knowledge that I was worth fighting for. The moment she pushed again, and what I finally made her understand. The cocoa powder stain on my kitchen ceiling lasted 11 days before I finally wiped it away. I kept it there on purpose. Every morning when I came downstairs and put the kettle on and looked up and saw it, I felt something warm move through me, the memory of Noah in that oversized apron, both hands deep in brownie batter, laughing with his whole body, the way children do when they have not yet learned to be self-conscious about joy. That was what I was protecting. Not my pride, not my schedule, not even my painting class or my lunches with Patricia or my trip to Savannah. I was protecting the conditions under which love could exist without resentment poisoning it. I was protecting the version of myself that could show up for Noah completely not depleted, not invisible, not slowly disappearing, but present and whole and genuinely glad to be there. I thought about that a lot in the weeks after Daniel's visit and the long phone call with Claire. I thought about the difference between helping from fullness and helping from fear. For more than a year, I had been helping from fear of being seen as selfish, fear of damaging my relationship with my son, fear of being the difficult one, the demanding one, the grandmother who couldn't just be grateful for time with her grandchild. That fear had made me smaller. It had made me quieter than I should have been, and more agreeable than was honest. What I had now felt different. It felt like standing on ground I had earned. I was not naive enough to think one difficult conversation solved everything. I had lived 63 years and I knew better. But I believed something real had shifted. I believed Claire had heard me. I believed Daniel had seen something he couldn't unsee. And I believed cautiously that we were building towards something better. Then November arrived, and I learned for the second time that I had underestimated how deep the pattern ran. It started small. It always starts small. The first week of November, Claire texted me on a Wednesday afternoon, not called texted, which I noted because the shift from calling to texting had a particular quality to it, like someone testing whether a side door was still unlocked. The text said, "Hey Mom, any chance you're free this Friday? Daniel has a work thing, and I have a dinner with clients. Would love for Noah to see you." I read it twice. I noticed the phrasing "would love for Noah to see you," not "I need you to watch Noah," not "can you come Friday." The framing had changed. She was asking in the language of family, now not the language of scheduling. I was in fact free Friday, and I genuinely wanted to see Noah. I texted back, "Friday works. What time do you need me?" She responded in under a minute. 6:30, we'd be back by 10. Thank you, Mom. That thank you. I sat with it for a moment. It was a small thing, but it wasn't nothing. Friday evening. I drove over and Noah greeted me at the door before I'd even knocked, which meant he'd been watching for my car from the window, which meant someone had told him I was coming, which meant he'd been looking forward to it. He grabbed my hand and pulled me straight to his bedroom to show me a book he'd gotten from the library about dinosaurs. And I sat on the floor of his room for 20 minutes, getting an extremely detailed lecture on the differences between carnivores and herbivores from a 4-year-old who pronounced Tyrannosaurus with complete confidence. Claire stopped in the doorway on her way out. She had her coat on her bag over her shoulder, running slightly behind the way she always was. "Thank you for coming," she said, directly looking at me. "I mean it." "Have a good dinner," I said. She almost said something else. I could see it, something that wanted to come out and then didn't. She nodded once and left. I turned back to Noah and his dinosaurs, and I thought, okay, maybe we're doing this. That belief lasted exactly 12 days. It was a Sunday. I remember that clearly because Sundays had become my sacred morning coffee, slow-no alarm, the newspaper. If I felt like it, the radio on low. My one unscheduled, uncommitted morning of the week, the one I protected, like it was an actual possession. My phone rang at 8:47 in the morning. Claire. On a Sunday, before 9. I felt it before I answered that specific internal shift like a compass needle swinging. "Good morning, Claire." "Morning. Listen, I need a favor." Not "how are you?" Not "sorry to call so early," just "I need a favor." "What's going on?" "My mom had a minor procedure done Friday. She's totally fine, nothing serious, but she needs someone to stay with her for a few days while she recovers. I'm going to drive down Monday morning and I'll probably be there through Wednesday, which means I need you for Noah Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I took a breath. This is Sunday morning. I know. It came up fast. Mom's neighbor called me last night, and I've been trying to figure out logistics ever since. Claire, we talked about notice. We talked about what it means to ask instead of assume. I'm asking. You're telling me the day before on a Sunday morning before 9 that you need me for 3 consecutive days starting tomorrow. It's an emergency. Is it you said Diane's procedure was Friday? That means you've known since at least Friday night and you're calling me Sunday morning. A pause. Brief, but there. I needed to figure out my own plans first before I called you. I understand that, and I'm sorry about your mother, I genuinely am. I like Diane and I hope she recovers quickly. But I need you to understand that my schedule doesn't automatically rearrange because yours has to. Monday, I have an appointment I've had for 3 weeks. Tuesday morning I have my painting class. Wednesday I can do, but it depends on the time. The silence on the other end was different from the old silences. It wasn't strategic. It was more like someone recalibrating, recognizing that the rules had actually changed and they had just run into the new version of them. "What kind of appointment Monday?" she asked. And there it was, the question that revealed everything still unresolved. Because I heard in it the assumption that if she could assess the importance of my Monday appointment, she could determine whether it was sufficient justification for my unavailability, as though that were her call to make. "The kind I've had scheduled for 3 weeks," I said. "That's what matters, Claire, not the category of it. I've planned my week around it." "Mom," her voice tightened, "I need you." "I know, and I'm sorry the timing is difficult. I can do Wednesday. For Monday and Tuesday, you need to find another solution." "There is no other solution. Daycare doesn't take him on short notice. I can't ask my neighbors, I don't know them well enough. Daniel is in the middle of a project at work that he absolutely cannot step back from right now." "Have you asked Daniel?" "I just told you." "Have you asked him? Or have you decided on his behalf that his work takes priority and then gone straight to calling me?" That landed. I heard it land. She was quiet for a moment that stretched out in a way that felt significant. "That's not fair," she said finally. "Maybe not, but it's a real question. Because in my experience, when there's a genuine family emergency, the first call should be to your partner, not your mother-in-law." Another silence. Longer. "I'll talk to Daniel," she said. Her voice was quieter now, but not soft, more like someone turning something over, really examining it. "Good. I'm still going to need help Wednesday. Wednesday afternoon I can do. Have Daniel drop Noah at my house. I'll keep him through dinner." "Okay." A pause. "Thank you. Take care of your mother." She hung up. I sat with my coffee for a long moment. Then I called Patricia. "You're not going to believe what just happened," I said when she picked up. "Try me," she said, and I heard the smile in it. "Daniel called me that evening. Mom." His voice had a quality I recognized, the quality of a man who has just had an uncomfortable revelation and is still sitting inside it. "Claire talked to me." "Good. I'm going to take Monday off, and Tuesday morning I can work from home until noon, and then we found a neighbor who can take Noah in the afternoon." "That's a good plan." "You were right, by the way. She went straight to you without asking me. I didn't even know she'd called you until after." I let that sit. "I'm not saying this to create a problem between you two," I said carefully. "I know that, but it tells me something. That her first instinct is still, we talked about this. We agreed we were going to be more intentional about this. And her first move on Sunday morning was to call you. Old habits move faster than intentions, Daniel. Give her time. She's trying." "Are you making excuses for her?" "I'm telling you how change works. It's not linear. She's adjusting something that has been her default for over a year. She's going to slip. What matters is whether she's actually hearing it when she does." He was quiet for a moment. "You're more patient with her than I expected you to be." "I'm patient with people who are genuinely trying. I'm not patient with being steamrolled. Those are different things." "Fair point." A pause. "Wednesday, you're sure you're okay with Noah?" "Wednesday, I would love to have him. I'm making chili. He's going to ask for 2 bowls and eat 4 bites of each. That's the correct way to eat chili when you're 4. He laughed. Real, unguarded. The Daniel laugh, the one that sounds exactly like Gerald's and always catches me somewhere in the vicinity of my heart. "Thank you, Mom, for all of it, not just Wednesday." "You don't have to thank me for being your mother." Yeah, I do. I really do. Diane recovered well. Claire was back by Wednesday afternoon earlier than expected, and she picked Noah up from my house instead of Daniel. She stood in my doorway while Noah put his shoes on, which took significantly longer than it should have, because he kept getting distracted by a beetle he had found on my porch steps, and she looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen from her before. Not the controlled look, not the strategic look, something more unguarded than either of those. "My mom asked about you," she said. I looked at her. "She said she hopes things are better between us." She said. Claire paused. She looked down at Noah, still crouched over the beetle, then back at me. She said she saw the calendar photograph. I know she did. She told me she was embarrassed for me. A beat. That's my mom doesn't say things like that. She almost never criticizes me, so when she said that I had to sit with it. That must have been hard to hear. It was. She met my eyes directly. I haven't been fair to you. I know that. I've known it since that phone call, the real one, the long one, but knowing something and actually feeling it are different. When my mom said she was embarrassed, I felt it. I looked at this woman, my daughter-in-law, my son's wife, the mother of my grandson, this driven and complicated and sometimes infuriating person, and I saw something I hadn't let myself see clearly before. I saw that she was not a villain. She was a woman who had grown up watching women disappear quietly into other people's needs and had absorbed the lesson that this was what women did, that this was what was available, that you took it without guilt because everyone involved had accepted the terms. She had applied that lesson to me without meaning to cause harm, and when I refused to accept the terms, it had genuinely confused her, because it disrupted something she believed to be the natural order. That didn't make what she had done acceptable, but it made it human. And understanding it as human gave me somewhere to stand that wasn't pure opposition. "I appreciate you saying that," I said. "I'm going to keep getting it wrong sometimes," she said. "I want you to know I know that. I'm going to slip and make assumptions and probably call you too late again at some point. I'm not perfect at this." "Neither am I. I spent over a year not saying anything when I should have said something the first time. We both contributed to this." She looked slightly startled, like she hadn't expected me to take any portion of responsibility. "Noah," she turned to him. "Bug stays outside. Let's go." "But Mom, the bug has a family buddy. He needs to go home." Noah considered this with tremendous seriousness, then gently set the beetle down on the porch railing. "Bye, Bug," he said solemnly. I caught Claire's eye over his head, and we both at exactly the same moment tried not to laugh, and failed. It was the first time we had laughed together in longer than I could remember. It was a small thing. It was everything. 3 weeks passed. Good weeks, not perfect, not without friction, but genuinely good. I went to painting class. I had lunch with Patricia. I called Rosalind twice. I started a new canvas, something bigger than my usual work, a piece I didn't have a clear vision for yet, but that felt like it wanted to be made. And then on a Thursday evening in late November, 5 days before Thanksgiving, something happened that I had not seen coming. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I nearly let it go to voicemail the way I did with most unknown numbers, but something made me pick up. "Is this Evelyn Parker?" "It is. Who's calling?" "My name is Sandra Holloway. I'm actually a friend of Claire's. I hope it's all right that I called. She didn't give me your number. I found it through the community center directory. I volunteer there." I sat down. "All right," I said. "What can I do for you, Sandra?" "I wanted to talk to you about something Claire said to me about 3 weeks ago. I've been thinking about it ever since, and I feel like you should know." My stomach tightened, not with dread exactly, more with the feeling of something important arriving. "Go ahead," I said. "Claire and I have coffee sometimes. Not close friends, but we see each other at school. Pick up our kids are in the same class. About 3 weeks ago, she was venting about a situation with her mother-in-law. About you, I figured out pretty quickly. And the things she was saying, some of them were..." She paused. "Some of them were unkind, about how you were being difficult, about how you'd always helped before, and now suddenly you were acting like your time was more valuable than everyone else's. She used the phrase..." Another pause. "She said you were being a selfish old woman." I held the phone very still. "She said that?" "Yes. And I know it's not my business, and I thought about not calling, but I have a mother-in-law who means the world to me, and if someone was saying those things about her, I would want someone to tell her, so I'm telling you." I thanked Sandra Holloway. I thanked her sincerely. I got off the phone and I sat in my living room and I stayed very still for a long time. Selfish old woman. I turned those 3 words over carefully. I examined them. I let myself feel what they brought up, and what they brought up was not the collapse I might have expected a month earlier. What they brought up was something cleaner, something clarifying. Because here was the truth. Claire had said something cruel to a friend at school pickup. She had said it 3 weeks ago, which was before the conversation in my doorway, before the thing with the beetle and the almost laugh, before what I had believed was a genuine shift between us, which meant one of 2 things. Either that shift was less real than I thought, or she was a person who vented to friends in unguarded moments and said things she didn't fully mean and wouldn't say to my face, which was human, which was flawed, which was something I had to decide what to do with. I sat with it through that evening. I did not call Daniel. I did not call Claire. I made dinner, and I ate at my own table, and I looked at the painting I was working on, and I thought about what it meant to love people who were imperfect, and what it cost to stay in relationship with them, and whether the cost was worth it. By the time I went to bed, I had decided. Friday morning, I called Claire. She answered on the second ring. "Mom, hey," defending yourself right away. "Can you do that?" A beat. "Yes." "Someone called me last night. A woman named Sandra Holloway. She told me what you said about me at school pickup, about 3 weeks ago." The silence was immediate and total. "Claire, Her voice was stripped of its usual composure. "Evelyn, Let me finish." My voice was steady, not angry. I was not calling to destroy her. I was calling because the alternative was to let it fester, and I would not do that. "I'm not calling to punish you. I'm calling because if I pretend I don't know, I'm doing the thing I promised myself I was done doing. I'm swallowing something to keep the peace, and it eventually poisons everything, so I'm telling you I know." "What she told you?" Claire's voice was strained. "I was having a terrible day. Noah had been sick all week. Daniel was traveling. I hadn't slept properly in days. And I said things that were cruel and that I didn't fully mean and that I absolutely should not have said. I know that. I knew it 20 minutes after I said it." "Selfish old woman," I said quietly, a sharp intake of breath. "Yes," she said, "just that. One word. And the shame in it was audible. Claire, I need you to understand something. You can be frustrated with me. You're allowed to vent to your friends. But those particular words, selfish and old, tell me something about how you actually see me on some level. Selfish because I want my own life. Old because that's meant to make me smaller. And I need you to examine that. Not for my sake alone, for yours. Because a woman who sees her own future in the word old as an insult is a woman building a cage for herself." Silence, long and weighted. When she spoke again, her voice was different from any version I had heard before. It was the voice of someone who had no walls up because the walls had just fallen down. "I'm scared," she said. "I wasn't expecting that." "Of what?" I asked carefully. "Of ending up—" She stopped, started again. "My grandmother, my father's mother. She spent the last 15 years of her life waiting for people to need her. That was her whole life, waiting and helping and never having anything that was her own. And she was so depleted, so empty. By the time she died, she seemed relieved." A pause. "When I see you setting these limits and protecting your time and going to Savannah and painting, I see someone who didn't become that. And part of me, some ugly, part of me resents it. Because I'm terrified that's where I'm headed, and you found something I don't know how to find yet." I held the phone and I breathed. "Claire," I said softly, "that's the most honest thing you've ever said to me." She made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "I'm sorry," she said, "for all of it, the calendar, the because I said so. Sandra, all of it. I'm genuinely sorry." "I know," I said. "I believe you. How do you do it?" Her voice was small, genuinely asking. How do you know what you're worth?" I thought about Gerald. I thought about 31 years in a classroom. I thought about sitting in the chair by my living room window in the dark, looking at my own life and asking whose it was. I thought about the drive to Savannah with the windows down and the wide, pale sky ahead of me. "I forgot for a while," I said, and then I remembered. And the remembering, it's not a one-time thing. You have to keep doing it. Every time someone tries to make you smaller, you have to remember again. How? You start by asking yourself what you would tell Noah if he were 60 years old and someone was treating him the way you've been treating me. What would you tell him to do? A long silence. I'd tell him to stand up for himself, she said. Then you already know the answer. Thanksgiving was 5 days later. Claire asked me, called 4 days ahead, asked if I would come. Not to cook, not to work, just to come, to be there. I brought a pie, a real one, not from a store from scratch, the one my mother taught me to make when I was 12 years old, the one I had not made in 3 years, because there had never seemed to be a reason to make a whole pie for one person. I walked in the door, and Noah cannonballed into me from across the room, and Daniel hugged me in the entryway, and Claire came out of the kitchen with flour on her hands and said, "The crust is not cooperating." "I brought backup," I said, and held up my pie. She laughed, the real laugh, the unguarded one, the one I had only heard from her twice before. And something in the room shifted the way rooms shift when something that has been wrong for a long time is finally beginning to come right. We ate at a table that was full and loud and chaotic the way Thanksgiving should be. Noah fell asleep on the couch before dessert and had to be carried upstairs, which Daniel did with the practiced ease of a father who has done it 100 times. Claire and I sat at the kitchen table after dinner and finished what was left of my pie and talked not about childcare, not about schedules, not about any of the things that had defined our relationship for so long. We talked about Claire's grandmother. We talked about what it had been like to lose Gerald. We talked about what we were afraid of and what we hoped for, and the particular loneliness of being a woman in the middle of life who has not yet figured out what the second half is supposed to look like. It was the first real conversation Claire and I had ever had. Not managed, not strategic, real. And here is what I learned sitting at that kitchen table on Thanksgiving night. The hardest part of the whole story was not saying no to Claire. It was not standing my ground or driving to Savannah or showing Diane the photograph or making that Friday morning call after what Sandra told me. The hardest part was staying open. Staying willing to believe that the person who had treated me poorly was capable of becoming something better. Because closing off would have been easier. Closing off would have been clean and self-protecting and entirely justified. But closing off would have cost me something I wasn't willing to pay. It would have cost me this kitchen table, this pie, this woman across from me who was figuring herself out the same way I was figuring myself out just a decade or two behind. It would have cost me the chance to watch someone I had nearly written off become someone I might actually one day call a friend. I drove home that night with the radio on and the heater running, and something in my chest that had no precise name, somewhere between relief and gratitude, and the specific satisfaction of a thing that has been hard and is slowly, genuinely becoming less hard. The cocoa powder stain was gone from my ceiling, but when I looked up at the spot where it had been, I still saw it. Some things you keep on purpose, even after they're gone. The price of peace. And the day I almost gave it all back. December came in cold and fast, the way it does in years that have already taken everything they intended to take from you. I had my routine back. I had my mornings. I had my painting class every Monday lunch with Patricia, every other Friday and Sunday afternoons, that belonged entirely to whatever I felt like doing with them. I had started the big canvas, the one I hadn't had a clear vision for yet, and it was becoming something. I didn't know exactly what yet, but I could feel it finding its shape the way a thing does when you stop forcing it and just show up for it consistently. I was sleeping better than I had in 2 years. I noticed that specifically. The quality of sleep had changed, not longer necessarily, but deeper. The kind of sleep that means your nervous system has stopped bracing for the next phone call. The kind that means you've stopped carrying other people's urgency into your own rest. Claire and I had texted 3 times since Thanksgiving. Not long exchanges, brief, almost casual. She sent me a photograph of a painting Noah had done at preschool that he'd told his teacher was for Grandma Evelyn. It was by any objective measure a purple blob with legs. I had it on my refrigerator within the hour. I let myself believe we had found a new footing. I let myself relax into it. That was the first mistake. Not a catastrophic mistake. Not the kind that undoes everything, but the kind that reminds you that healing is not a straight line and that the people in your life are not finished changing just because you've had one good Thanksgiving together. The second week of December on a Tuesday morning, Claire called. Not texted. Called, which I noticed before I even answered. "Good morning," I said. "Morning. Hey, so I wanted to talk to you about Christmas." Something in my chest went very still. Not alarm, more like attention sharpening. The particular kind of alertness that comes from recognizing a moment before it fully announces itself. "All right," I said. "What about it?" "Daniel and I were talking, and we thought it would be really nice if you spent the whole week with us, like from the 23rd through the 28th. We have the guest room. Noah would love having you there every morning. You could do Christmas Eve together, Christmas morning, the whole thing." I waited, because I heard something in the way she'd laid it out, too smooth, too fully formed, too much like something rehearsed, that told me the whole picture hadn't arrived yet. "That sounds lovely for parts of it," I said carefully. "What does the week look like on your end, a beat?" "Well, I have a work thing on the 23rd, just a half-day morning. And Daniel has a client dinner the 24th, Christmas Eve, I know, but it's been on the books for months, he can't get out of it. And then the 25th and 26th are fully ours, totally free, it'll be wonderful. And then the 27th, I have a quick trip just overnight, a friend's thing in Charlotte that I've had planned. Back by noon the 28th. I sat down slowly. Let me tell you what I had just been offered. 6 days at their house, during which Claire would be at work for the first morning, Daniel would be absent Christmas Eve, and Claire would be gone overnight on the 27th. In between the actual family time, Christmas Day the 26th, I was being invited to arrive early enough to cover the gaps and stay late enough to cover the exit. It was the calendar on their kitchen wall, in a different form, dressed up in Christmas lights and guest room hospitality, but structurally identical to what I had photographed in October. The difference was that this time I recognized it immediately. "Claire," I said, "walk me through the 23rd again." "I have a morning thing, I'd be out by maybe 1 o'clock, so you'd just be with Noah until I got back. And Christmas Eve. Daniel's dinner is at 7. He'd probably be back by 10:30. So Christmas Eve I'm with Noah. From what time does Daniel leave for this dinner?" A pause, shorter than she probably intended. "He'd leave around 6:30. So Christmas Eve I'm alone with Noah from 6:30 to 10:30. It's Christmas Eve. Noah loves spending Christmas Eve with you." "I love spending Christmas Eve with Noah. That's not what I'm talking about, and I think you know that." The silence stretched. "Claire, do you hear what this week looks like? You're inviting me to spend 6 days at your house. During 3 of those days, at least one of you needs coverage. You've framed it as a gift, come stay with us, be part of the holiday. But what you've actually constructed is a schedule where I fill in your gaps. Again. That's not—" She stopped. I heard her breathe. "That's not what I intended." "Maybe not, but it's what you built, and I need you to see that." Another silence. This one had a different texture, not defensive, more like someone who has just looked at a thing they made and seen it clearly for the first time. "Oh," she said quietly, "just that." "Oh, yeah," I said. "I didn't do it on purpose." "I believe you. That's actually the part that matters most, Claire, because if you had done it on purpose, I'd be angry. But you didn't do it on purpose, which means the habit is so deep that it happens without you noticing. And that's what we have to keep working on. Together." She was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want Christmas to look like?" she finally asked. And the question was genuine, I could hear that. She was actually asking. "I want to come Christmas morning. I want to watch Noah open presents and have breakfast together and spend the day with all of you. I want it to be something I'm choosing freely because I love you all. Not something I'm filling in because the schedule requires it. And Christmas Eve, I'll be at my own home. If Daniel has a client dinner and you're home with Noah, that's a family evening. That's yours. He'll ask for you. Noah will ask for you on Christmas Eve. Tell him Grandma's home making cookies for tomorrow, which I will be." A pause. And then, to her genuine credit, to the credit of the woman she was slowly, effortfully becoming, she said, "That's fair. That's actually really fair." We worked out the details. Christmas morning, 10 o'clock. I'd stay through dinner. I'd bring the pie again, because Noah had apparently talked about that pie for 2 weeks straight after Thanksgiving, which Daniel had texted to tell me, and which had made me absurdly happy. Before we hung up, Claire said something that I wrote down afterward, kept it on a notepad in my kitchen drawer. "I'm still learning how to do this," she said. "I want you to know I know that. I'm still getting it wrong and then catching myself, but I'm catching myself faster than I used to." "That's all any of us can do," I said, and I meant it. Christmas morning arrived with the particular clarity that cold December mornings have, sharp and bright, everything defined. I drove to their house with the pie in the passenger seat and a bag of gifts in the back, and a feeling in my chest that was uncomplicated and clean. Noah met me at the door again, same as always. The boy was constitutionally incapable of waiting inside when he knew someone he loved was coming. He had Santa-themed pajamas on, and his hair was spectacular, the vertical gravity-defying kind that only children achieve. And he grabbed my hand and pulled me straight to the living room because there were things under the tree that required my immediate attention. Daniel was in the kitchen making eggs. He handed me a cup of coffee when I came in and said simply, "Merry Christmas, Mom. Merry Christmas, baby." He hugged me the way he had at Thanksgiving, the real hug, the Gerald hug. I held on for an extra second. Claire came downstairs 20 minutes into the present opening, which I understood without being told. She had given me those 20 minutes with Daniel and Noah alone. That was deliberate. That was a gift of a particular kind, the kind that costs something and is not acknowledged out loud. We had a good day. I want to say that plainly because I don't want this story to be only about struggle and conflict and the things that went wrong. We had a genuinely good day. Noah got a telescope that he was not remotely old enough for and was completely obsessed with. Daniel made his father's cornbread recipe for the first time ever, which he had been nervous about for weeks, and which came out nearly right. Claire and I did the dishes together after dinner without any awkwardness, which was its own kind of milestone. When I drove home that night, the lights of their house receded in my rearview mirror, and I felt something I hadn't felt in relation to that family in a very long time. Gratitude without complication. Just clean, simple, unencumbered gratitude. January was quiet. February was quieter. I finished the big canvas in early February. It turned out to be a seascape, which surprised me because I hadn't consciously been thinking about the ocean. Wide water, early light, the particular blue-gray of the Atlantic before the sun gets high. Joan held it up at the end of class, and the room was silent for a moment before people started clapping, and I sat there with paint on my hands, feeling something that was close to proud, and trying to remember the last time I had felt that about something I made. I had lunch with Patricia on a Thursday in February, which was unusual. We normally did Fridays because she had called and said she needed to see me, and it was time-sensitive. I arrived at the restaurant and she was already there, which was also unusual because Patricia is constitutionally incapable of being anywhere before the agreed time. She had ordered coffee and was holding the mug with both hands and looking at me with an expression I recognized as the Patricia expression that means she has something significant to say and is working up to it. "What happened?" I said, sitting down. "Nothing happened. I wanted to tell you something and I kept almost calling and then not calling because I wasn't sure you needed to hear it, and then I decided you did." "Patricia, I've been watching you for the last 4 months," she said, "since all of this started, and I want to tell you something that I don't think anyone has said to you yet." She put the mug down. "I'm proud of you. Not the way people say it casually. I mean it specifically and seriously. What you did, what you kept doing every time it was hard, every time it would have been easier to back down. Evelyn, most people don't do that. Most people choose the path of least resistance and call it love. You chose the harder path and called it what it actually was, which is self-respect. And I'm proud of you." I looked at my oldest friend across a restaurant table and felt something move through me that I couldn't quite name. "I almost backed down," I said, "more than once. I know you told me, but you didn't. There were days I almost called her and apologized, just to make it stop. I know that too. It would have been so much easier." Easier and better are different things. You know that. You've known it your whole life, you just forgot it for a year. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine the way she'd done at Thanksgiving. The Evelyn I met 22 years ago would have set that boundary in month 2. I want her back. I want my friend back. "She's back," I said. "She is." Patricia smiled. "She drove to Savannah. She's definitely back." It was a Wednesday evening in late February when everything almost came apart again. Not almost, it did come apart briefly, loudly, in a way I hadn't anticipated and wasn't prepared for. I want to tell you this part because I think it's the most important part, and I think it's the part that most stories leave out. Daniel called me at 7:15. He sounded different from the first word, clipped careful, like a man containing something. "Mom, are you home?" "I'm home. What's wrong?" "Can I come over?" "Daniel, what happened?" Can I come over? Please." He was at my door in 35 minutes. He had his coat on still when he sat down on my couch, which told me whatever was coming hadn't left him enough room to think about ordinary things like taking his coat off. His eyes were tired. Not just today tired, the accumulated tired of a man who has been managing something for a long time. I sat down across from him and waited. Claire and I had a fight, he said. A real one. Not an argument, a fight. The kind we haven't had in years. About me. About you. About the whole thing. About all of it going back months. He pulled his coat off, finally dropped it beside him. She said something tonight that I don't know if I should tell you, but I think I have to because it involves you and you deserve to know. Tell me. He looked at me directly. She said she thinks you've changed, that you're not the same person you were before all of this started, that since you started protecting your time, you've become distant, colder. She misses who you were before. I let that land. And what did you say? I said that the person she misses was a version of you that was slowly disappearing, that the warmth she's mourning was real, but it was being maintained at a cost that was unsustainable, that she was grieving a version of you that wasn't actually available to anyone anymore, including yourself. He paused. She said I was taking your side. Are you? I'm taking the side of what's true, which is that you are warmer now than you were 6 months ago. You're more present. When you come over, you're actually there, not counting the hours, not looking at your phone, not that thing where your eyes would get this certain quality, like you were managing being there instead of just being there. He stopped. She can't see that yet. She's still grieving the version of you she was using. That word using landed hard. He had said it plainly, his own wife, about what had been happening. Daniel, this is hard for you, I said. Yeah, it is. You're between us. I've been between you since October. I'm not complaining about it. I'm tired, Mom. I love you both. I want this to be okay. It is okay. Even when it's hard, it's okay. She said, he stopped, started again. She said she thinks you enjoy it, setting limits, saying no, like it's become something you do because it makes you feel powerful, not because it's actually necessary. The room went very quiet. I thought about that for a long moment. I thought about it seriously the way any honest person has to take seriously the possibility that they've overcorrected. I examined it. I turned it over. And then I looked at my son. Do you believe that? I asked. He met my eyes without flinching. No, he said. I think she said it because she's frustrated and she's trying to make sense of why things feel different. But no, I don't believe it. Good, because it isn't true. Not because I'm incapable of overcorrecting. I am human and I make mistakes. But because I can account for every no I've said since October. Every one of them came from a genuine conflict with something that was already mine, not from enjoying the word. I know that. But I need you to hear me say it, because if it ever did become that, if I ever started saying no for sport, for power, for the feeling of it, I would want you to tell me, that's not who I want to be either. He looked at me for a moment, and the exhaustion in his face shifted into something else. Something like the particular relief of a man who has just been reminded of something he already knew. You're the most self-aware person I know, he said. I've had 63 years of practice. He almost smiled. What do I do about Claire? You let her feel what she's feeling. You don't try to fix it or argue her out of it. You just let it be true for her until she finds her own way to the other side of it. She will. She's been finding her way. It's not a straight line. You're not angry at her. I'm tired, I said honestly. Not angry. Tired in the way you get when you've been working hard at something and it keeps requiring more work. That's different from angry. She should hear that. She will. When she's ready to call me, I'll pick up. He stayed another hour. We talked about other things, his work, a trip he and Claire were considering in the spring, whether Noah was going to be a scientist or a naturalist or possibly both. The ordinary conversation of a family finding its way back to ordinary. When he left, he paused at the door. Thank you, he said, for not making me choose. I would never make you choose. You're my son. That's not conditional. I know, but it helps to hear it. Claire called me 4 days later. Saturday morning, 9:03. Not at 6:50. Not on a Sunday before I'd had my coffee. 9:03 on a Saturday, which I understood was itself a communication. I owe you an apology, she said, before I could even say good morning. Daniel told me what he said when he came over. I know he came. I asked him to go. Actually, I thought hearing your voice might help him, and I didn't know what else to do with him that night. But I know he told you what I said. He did. I said some things that were unfair, that you enjoy it. That isn't right. I said it because I was frustrated, and because it's easier to make someone into a villain than to sit with the fact that they're just a person with limits. And you're just a person with limits. That's not a character flaw. I've been treating it like one. Claire, let me finish. Please. A breath. Daniel said something to me after he got home from your house. He said you were warmer now than you were 6 months ago. And I've been sitting with that for 4 days because my first reaction was that he was wrong. And then I started actually thinking about it, and I realized he's right. You come over, and you're present. Fully present. Not performing presence actually in it. And I think I was so used to the version of you that was always there but never quite there, always on the edge of the door, never fully in the room, that I didn't notice when that changed, when you actually came back. I sat down in my kitchen chair. That's remarkably perceptive, I said. It took me 4 days and 2 conversations with my therapist to get there. You're in therapy. I started in November, after Thanksgiving. A pause. I have some things to work on, apparently. Something shifted in my chest. Not surprise exactly, more like recognition. The particular feeling of watching someone do the hard work of knowing themselves. That's a brave thing, I said. It doesn't feel brave. It feels like sitting in a room being wrong about things for 50 minutes a week. That's what brave usually feels like. She laughed. The real laugh. The unguarded one. I don't want you to be a resource, she said. I want you to be my family. I'm working on understanding the difference from the inside out, not just intellectually. My therapist says the head always gets there first and the instincts take longer, so I'm going to keep getting it wrong sometimes. But I wanted you to know I'm working on it. That's all I've ever wanted, I said. I know. I think I finally actually know that. We talked for 40 minutes, about her therapy, and about her grandmother, and about the particular shape of fear that drives people to treat others as resources rather than relationships, about what she wanted her life to look like in 10 years, about what I wanted mine to look like. It was the second real conversation Claire and I had ever had. I thought we are learning each other, finally, in the right direction. March arrived. The light changed, the particular shift that happens in early March, when the days are getting noticeably longer, but the warmth hasn't caught up yet, so everything looks like it should feel like spring, but still bites with cold. I noticed it from my kitchen window. I noticed it from the garden where things were starting to stir beneath the surface, even though the surface itself was still bare. I had reached out to Rosalind in late February and told her everything that had happened since Savannah. She listened the way she always did, all the way to the end. You know what you did, she said when I finished. You changed the whole system, not just your behavior, the whole system. Claire, Daniel, how they relate to each other, how they plan. Their whole household is different because you changed one thing, your answer. I didn't mean to change their household. Doesn't matter what you meant. What you did is what counts, and what you did rippled. That's how it works. I thought about that. The ripple. The way one honest conversation had moved through 5 months and touched Daniel's relationship with Claire, and Claire's decision to enter therapy, and the way Noah's parents now made plans with each other before reaching for the phone to call me. I want to come back, Rosalind said. I want to visit you, in your yellow house with the garden. Come in the spring, I said, when the garden is doing something. Next month. I'll bring wine. Bring the good kind. Evelyn, I always bring the good kind. I was laughing when I hung up. Real laughter, the whole body kind, the kind I had forgotten for a while. My phone sat quiet on the kitchen counter. No incoming call, no schedule descending on me from outside, just the morning wide open, belonging entirely to itself. I poured another cup of coffee. I went to my canvas. I picked up my brush, and I painted until noon without stopping, without checking the clock, without waiting for anything. Just making something. Just being alive in it. That I thought is what I was fighting for. Not the no, not the argument or the boundary or the confrontation. This quiet, unhurried, completely ordinary morning that belonged to no one but me. What I found on the other side. The life I almost gave away. Rosalind arrived on a Friday in early April with 2 bottles of a Napa Valley Red that cost more than my electric bill and a carry-on bag she had clearly overpacked because she intended to stay longer than a weekend and wanted to see if I'd notice and say something. I noticed. I didn't say anything. I just made up the guest room with the good sheets and put a vase of the first flowers from my garden on the dresser and let her settle in, the way you let someone you've known 30 years settle in without ceremony, without fuss, just with the ease of people who have run out of things to prove to each other. She stood in my kitchen the first night with a glass of wine while I made pasta, and she looked around at everything. The painting on the counter that was almost finished, the calendar on the wall that had my handwriting on it and nobody else's, the flowers from the garden, the second coffee mug that was mine and only mine, and she said, "This is what it's supposed to look like. What is your life? This is what it's supposed to look like." I stirred the sauce and didn't answer right away because I was feeling something that was too full for a quick response. She was right. This was what it was supposed to look like, and for a long time it hadn't. "I lost about 14 months, I said finally. "You got them back. Most of them. Most counts." She raised her glass. "To most." I raised mine. We ate at my table with the windows open to the April air and talked until 11 o'clock the way we hadn't done since before Gerald died, since before retirement, since before the world rearranged itself around loss and obligation. We talked about everything and nothing, the way you can only do with someone who has known you long enough to hold all the versions of you at once. The young version, the grieving version, the version that almost disappeared, and the version sitting here right now with wine and pasta and her own life, finally back in her own hands. When I went to bed that night, I lay in the dark for a few minutes before sleep came, something I rarely did anymore. I used to lie awake running through lists, replaying phone calls, bracing for tomorrow's obligations. Now I just lay there in the quiet of my own house and felt the specific piece of a life that had been reclaimed. I thought I almost didn't get here. I almost kept saying yes until there was nothing left to say it with. And then I slept deeply and without interruption until 7:15 in the morning. Rosalind stayed 4 days. On the second day, Saturday, Noah came over. Daniel dropped him off at 10 in the morning, just Noah, no Claire, which had become the natural Saturday rhythm over the past few months. Daniel would stay for coffee 20 minutes, just enough to talk, and not enough to require anything, and then leave Noah for the morning. It had evolved without anyone formally deciding it. It had simply become the shape of things. Noah walked through my door and stopped when he saw Rosalind standing in the living room. He turned to me with enormous eyes. "Who is that?" he whispered, loudly, the way 4-year-olds whisper, which is to say, not quietly at all. "That is my friend Rosalind. She came all the way from Savannah to visit." He looked at her. She looked at him. She crouched down to his level, which was the right instinct, and said, "I've heard a lot about you. Your grandmother says you know everything about dinosaurs." Noah's entire face changed. It became the face of a person who has just been handed something precious. "I know about the Cretaceous period," he said. "Tell me," she said. And that was it. They were inseparable for the rest of the morning. Rosalind sat on my living room floor for 45 minutes, receiving a comprehensive education on prehistoric life from a 4-year-old in dinosaur socks, and she did it with complete attention and genuine delight, asking questions that Noah answered with breathtaking authority. I stood in the kitchen doorway watching them and felt something so large I almost didn't know what to do with it. This was what I had protected. Not just my painting class and my lunches with Patricia and my mornings that belonged to me. This, the version of me that could be fully present in this room, watching my grandson and my oldest friend sitting on the floor talking about the Cretaceous period without one part of my mind counting hours or managing resentment or waiting for the next phone call from someone who needed something. This whole uncomplicated, completely present moment. Daniel came back at noon to pick Noah up and found the 3 of us at my kitchen table eating grilled cheese sandwiches. Noah had requested them specifically with the crusts cut off specifically, and I had complied because that is what grandmothers do, and he stood in the doorway for a moment before coming in, and I saw his face do something quiet and important. I saw it too, whatever I was seeing. He saw the room and the sandwiches and his son mid-sentence about something a triceratops had apparently done that was very impressive, and he looked at me across the table with his father's eyes, and he nodded once, just once, like a person confirming something they needed to confirm. I nodded back. Some conversations don't require words. Rosalind left on Tuesday. I drove her to the airport and hugged her at the curb, and she held on the way as she had at my front door 6 months earlier, the long hug that means something. "Next time you come to me," she said, "next time I come to you. Don't make me wait another 2 years. I won't. I want to see what you paint next. I'll send photographs. She picked up her bag and walked through the automatic doors without looking back. Which is her way. She doesn't do long goodbyes, she finds them inefficient, and I have always loved that about her. I drove home through a Tuesday morning that was entirely beautifully mine. And that was when I let myself begin to take stock. Not in a dramatic way, not sitting at the kitchen table with receipts the way I had in the dark days, but quietly, honestly looking at the shape of my life and comparing it to the shape it had been. 6 months earlier, I had been disappearing. I can say that plainly now because I can see it clearly from where I'm standing. I had been giving away pieces of myself, my mornings, my friendships, my creative life, my sense of my own value in increments, small enough that each one felt manageable, even generous, even loving. And the accumulation of those increments had nearly buried the person I had spent 60 years becoming. Now I was painting seriously for the first time in a decade. I had 4 canvases completed in the past 5 months, and Joan had asked me quietly after class with the particular directness of someone who means something whether I had ever considered showing my work. I hadn't considered it. The idea had landed in me somewhere, and I was letting it sit, not forcing it, just letting it be a possibility that existed in my life. Patricia and I had settled into a rhythm that felt like the friendship we had always been capable of and never quite had the room for. Fridays that sometimes stretched into late afternoon, texts during the week just to send something funny or beautiful or interesting, the particular comfort of a friendship that requires nothing to justify itself. I was talking to Rosalind every 2 weeks, real conversations, long ones, the kind we had always promised each other and never quite managed. My garden was entering its best season. I had planted things in February that were coming up now in April, and the satisfaction of watching them emerge, the predictable reward of patience and preparation, was something I had almost forgotten was available to me. And every other Sunday Noah came over. We had a rhythm there too. He picked the activity, sometimes baking, sometimes a walk, sometimes sitting on the porch looking at clouds and him telling me what each one looked like, which was always something surprising. He had told me once very seriously that a cloud looked like a dog who is also a little bit of a whale. I had written that down, and it was in my kitchen drawer next to the notepad with Claire's words on it. That drawer had become a small archive of the things I wanted to keep. It was a Sunday in mid-April, 3 Sundays after Rosalind left, when the last twist arrived, the one I had genuinely not seen coming. I was at Daniel and Claire's house for dinner. Not a regular thing they had asked with actual advance notice, whether I'd like to come for Sunday dinner, and I had said yes. Claire had cooked, which she rarely did, and which I understood to be its own kind of gesture. The food was good. The table was loud in the right ways. Noah ate 4 bites of his actual dinner and then asked for dessert with the confidence of someone who doesn't understand why that's a problem. After dinner, Daniel took Noah upstairs for bath and bed. Claire and I were alone in the kitchen cleaning up, and the ease between us had become something I could feel physically, the absence of the old tension, the old strategic quality. We were just 2 people in a kitchen doing the dishes, and then she said, "Can I show you something?" "Sure." She dried her hands and picked up her phone and turned it toward me. It was a photograph of a calendar. Her calendar, the big paper one from the kitchen wall, and I looked at it and I felt my breath catch because what I was looking at was a month April with careful color-coded planning on it. There were blocks for her work, blocks for Daniel's things, a block that said Noah playdate in green, a block that said Evelyn dinner in a different color, clearly marked clearly mine on the Sunday we were currently living, and there were empty days, real empty days held open belonging to no one. My name appeared once that month. Once. Asked, planned, honored. I looked up from the phone. Claire was watching me with an expression I had not seen on her before. Nervous. Genuinely nervous, the way a person looks when they've done the work and they're not sure yet if it's enough. "I have a system now," she said. "I plan the whole month at the beginning. I figure out what we actually need and then I ask people. In advance. With notice." A pause. "You'll see there are some Fridays where I've written in a sitter name. We found someone, a college student who Noah actually likes. She's reliable. She's not you, but—" She stopped. "She doesn't need to be you." I handed the phone back. I didn't say anything for a moment because I was full, genuinely full in the way that makes speaking momentarily difficult. "How long did this take you to set up?" I asked. "The system a few weeks. My therapist helped. I kept resisting it because I thought planning that far ahead meant I was being rigid. And she pointed out that I wasn't resisting rigidity, I was resisting the loss of the option to call you last minute, which meant I was resisting fully letting go of the assumption. I looked at this woman, this complicated, driven, imperfect, genuinely trying woman. "Claire," I said, "this is everything I asked for." "I know. I should have done it 6 months ago." "You did it now. That's what matters." She put her phone in her pocket and turned back to the dishes, and I picked up a towel and we finished the kitchen side by side without saying anything else, and the silence was the most comfortable silence we had ever shared. When I drove home that night, I sat in my car in my own driveway for a few minutes before going inside, not because I was upset or needed to collect myself, just because I wanted to be still in that moment before it became the next one. I thought about the photograph I had taken of their old calendar in October. My name in blue marker, 8 times 6 weeks, no conversation. I had kept that photograph on my phone all this time. I looked at it one more time that night in my driveway, and then I deleted it. I didn't need it anymore. I had gotten what it represented. I didn't need to keep the wound alongside the healing. April turned into May. May opened up like something that had been waiting to happen. I got a call in the first week of May from a woman named Helen Marsh, who ran a small art collective in town, 15, maybe 20 local artists. They had a gallery space they used for rotating shows, nothing commercial, nothing pretentious, just a community of people who made things and wanted to share them. Joan from my painting class had given her my name. "Joan said you've been doing exceptional work this year," Helen said. She showed me photographs of 3 pieces. I wanted to call and ask if you'd be interested in being part of our June show. I sat down in my kitchen. "A show," I said. "Just a group show. 8 artists, 2 or 3 pieces each. The opening is the 2nd Saturday in June. Low pressure, no sales requirement, just your work on a wall where people can see it." I thought about the seascape. The big one, the wide water and the early light and the blue-gray Atlantic that had come out of me without my fully understanding why. I thought about the 2 smaller pieces I'd done, since both of them better than anything I'd painted before, the skill coming back faster than I expected and taking me somewhere new when it arrived. "Yes," I said, before I had time to talk myself into something more cautious. "Yes, I'd like to do that." "Wonderful. Can you come by the space this week to discuss placement and—" "Yes," I said again, "absolutely yes." When I hung up, I stood in my kitchen and put both hands on the counter and took a breath and laughed out loud into the empty room. Then I called Patricia. "I'm going to be in an art show," I said when she picked up. The scream she let out was loud enough that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. I called Rosalind next. She cried, actual tears. I heard them in her voice. "Gerald would lose his mind," she said. "He would have driven 3 hours to stand in front of the paintings and tell everyone in the room that his wife made them. He absolutely would have. He would have brought a sign." We both laughed, and I cried a little too, the good kind, the kind that is made of gratitude and love, and the particular sweetness of missing someone while being glad to still be here. The opening was the 2nd Saturday in June. I want to tell you about that night because that night is where everything came together in a way I couldn't have scripted. Daniel came, Claire came. They got a sitter for Noah, the college student, the reliable one, and they came to a gallery on a Saturday night to stand in front of paintings their 63-year-old mother-in-law had made, and they did it without being asked more than once. Patricia was there with her husband. Rosalind had driven up from Savannah. She hadn't told me she was coming. She had coordinated with Daniel, and when I walked in and saw her standing in front of the seascape, I stopped in the doorway and couldn't move for a moment. My neighbor Margaret came. Joan was there. Helen Marsh introduced me to people I didn't know who looked at my work with the kind of attention that makes you understand why artists make things public even when it's terrifying. But the moment I want to tell you about, the one I have returned to many times since that night, happened about an hour into the opening. I was standing with a glass of wine talking to Helen when I felt a hand on my arm. I turned around. It was Claire. She had been looking at the seascape for several minutes. I had noticed her there from across the room, the way she was standing in front of it, still not performing engagement, but actually in it, actually looking. She said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When did you paint this one?" "February, the very beginning of February." She looked at it again, then back at me. "That's right after everything, after the hardest part." "Yes. It looks like open space, like standing at the edge of something enormous and not being afraid of it." I looked at the painting, at the wide water, the early light, the horizon that kept going. "That's exactly what it is," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that I did not expect, something that cost her something to say. I could hear it, the particular weight of words that have been assembled carefully over time. "I think I've spent my whole career being afraid of open space," she said. "Afraid that if I'm not filling every gap, managing every variable, someone else is going to decide I'm not necessary. And I transferred that onto you. I tried to fill your open space because I couldn't stand it in my own life, and that wasn't fair to you." I looked at my daughter-in-law in a gallery on a Saturday night in June, standing in front of a painting I had made in the first week of February, when I was just beginning to understand that I had gotten something essential back, and I felt something that I can only describe as the completion of a circle. "I think," I said carefully, "that is the most important thing you have ever said to me." Her eyes were bright. She blinked once hard, the way people do when they've decided not to cry in public. "My therapist is going to want to hear about this conversation," she said. "Tell her it happened in front of a seascape. She'll appreciate the symbolism." She laughed, the real laugh, and this time it didn't surprise me anymore. Daniel appeared at my elbow with a fresh glass of wine and looked between us with the slightly cautious expression of a man who has learned not to assume what any given moment between these two women means. "Everything okay?" "Everything is very okay," I said. He visibly relaxed. He looked at the seascape. He looked at me. "Dad would have brought a sign," he said. "Rosalind said the same thing. He would have put your name on it in giant letters and stood right there." He pointed to the center of the room, making everyone look. "He would have been completely embarrassing. He would have been the happiest person here." I put my hand on my son's arm and held it there for a moment. He covered my hand with his. We stood together in front of that painting, the wide water, the early light, the horizon that kept going, and I let myself feel the full weight of the evening, everything it had taken to get here, every phone call and confrontation and quiet morning and canceled plan that had eventually, slowly at great cost and with great reward, led to this room, this painting, these people who loved me, standing on either side of me. The show ran for 3 weeks. On the last day, Helen called me and asked if I'd be interested in being part of the fall show. I said yes immediately. Again, without talking myself into caution. 2 weeks after the show closed, Noah came over for his Sunday morning visit. He was 5 now, had been since May, and 5 was bringing new language and new questions and a new capacity for the kind of serious philosophical inquiry that could make an hour disappear. I was sitting across from me at the kitchen table eating the banana bread we had made together. His job had been to mash the bananas, which he took with a seriousness bordering on professional, when he looked up at me with something already forming behind his eyes. "Grandma, are you happy?" I put down my coffee. It is a remarkable thing to be asked that question by a 5-year-old with banana bread on his face and complete earnestness in his eyes. There is no possibility of a polished answer. There is only the truth. "Yes," I said, "I'm very happy." He considered this. "Good," he said, with tremendous finality, the way children close a subject when they have received satisfactory information. Then he took an enormous bite of banana bread and immediately wanted to talk about whether fish could dream, which kept us busy for the rest of the morning. That afternoon, after Daniel had picked him up, I sat in the kitchen in the quiet that followed his visits, that particular warm quiet, full of whatever he had left behind, and I thought about that question. "Are you happy?" I thought about what happy meant, having spent several months relearning its vocabulary. It didn't mean the absence of difficulty or the absence of relationships that required work. It didn't mean everything was resolved or that Claire would never slip back into old patterns or that I would never have to hold a line again. Life was not finished being complicated. People were not finished being human. Happy meant this waking up in my own house on my own terms, painting because I wanted to, and showing the work because I was brave enough to. Having the friends who had always been there actually present in my life again. Watching my son navigate something difficult and find his way through it. Watching a woman I had almost written off sit in a therapist's office every week doing the work of becoming better. Watching my grandson grow into a person who asked the people he loved whether they were okay. Happy meant having a life that was mine, that I lived inside of, that I had fought for and protected and refused to surrender, not out of selfishness, but out of the understanding that love given from a full life is different from love given from an empty one, that the best version of myself, the grandmother, the friend, the painter, the mother, required the space to exist, That was what I had said no to protect. Not the no itself, but the yes on the other side of it. The yes to the painting class. The yes to Savannah. The yes to Patricia's lunch, and Rosalind's red wine, and my own Sunday mornings, and the flowers in the garden, and the wide open blue of a canvas that had no obligation but to become what it was becoming, the yes to my own life. I thought about the woman who had stood in the kitchen 6 months earlier, staring at her name on someone else's calendar, feeling something she couldn't yet name. She had thought she was angry. What she was, I understood now, was awake. She was finally painfully productively awake to what had been happening and what it was costing her, and she had made a choice. Not a grand choice, not a dramatic one, just a quiet, certain daily choice to keep being a person in her own right, even when it was hard, even when the people she loved didn't yet understand why it was necessary. That woman had saved her own life, and she had done it one sentence at a time. I picked up my paintbrush. Outside my garden was doing everything I had asked it to do. Inside my life was finally fully, unambiguously, at long last mine, and no one not ever again would take that from me without a fight.